Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. 3 hours. That's how long Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski spoke with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Warsaw. Talks came just days after Poland closed its border with Belarus, citing security threats from Minsk and Moscow. Now, while China expressed concern over the impact on trade, Poland insists the decision was necessary amid repeated provocations. And now to discuss it all further, we're joined in the studio by Marcin Przychodniak, China analyst from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you on the program. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin about the significance of this visit. Wang Yi is on a tour in several countries, but Poland and Warsaw, 3 hours with Radosław Sikorski. So what does this tell us of this visit and its significance?
Yeah, not only Radosław Sikorski, but also talks with President. But I don't think it's significant in the sense that it's coming up in a certain period of time, but it's definitely significant because of who Minister Wang Yi is. I mean, he's not only minister, but also a very high-ranked party official in terms of foreign affairs and foreign policy. I mean, he's a member of political bureau, and he also chairs the Foreign Affairs Commission within the Central Committee. I mean, there are a lot of positions, but these are very important positions in terms of creating and constructing Chinese foreign policy. So it's always good to communicate with these high-ranking party official from China.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as you said, Wang Yi is someone of influence in China, and obviously that means something. But given the relationship right now between not just the EU, but Poland specifically and China, and what's happened now with the Zapad exercise, the closure of the borders, I mean, that is also, I think, at play here. What do you think happened during those conversations with those gentlemen?
We are a bit aware of what happened. I mean, we have official statements from both Poland and China, respectively, and they are different, and it's quite good to read between differences there. I mean, of course, Chinese statement does not mention the topics you just said about. I mean, the issue of border with Belarus and of relationship. I mean, the actions of Russia, drones intrusions. These were mainly mentioned by Minister Sikorski with Chinese response, but not direct, announcement from the Chinese how they see the situation publicly. So this was important, but I would not directly connect specifically the closure of the border and the drone intrusion as the reasons of why Minister Wang Yi came to Poland. These are always important topics, but the visit was, of course, prepared much before these events happened. I mean, so this is important to talk about, and Chinese didn't really provide with an answer that we would probably expect them to hear, or not, maybe not expect, but that could have an imminent effect on the situation. I mean, and as I don't really believe also Polish minister actually expected the Chinese to deliver something significant in that regard. But it's always good to provide them with our own seeing and thinking about the situation. I mean, China is a permanent member of the Security Council, and it has its obligations, which it doesn't fulfill. So it's good to provide them with a narrative and our observation on the situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said the visit, Marcin, was already something that had been on the calendar for some time. Nevertheless, the current geopolitics are what they are. With this closure as well, just a reminder of viewers, that trade route, that rail route, essentially now blocked from China into Europe, that carries 90% of trade into the continent. It's worth billions to not just to China, but to also, in a way, to Poland. So, I mean, that's going to play a role. And how much of that, let's say, leverage is there for Poland to have any say on, let's talk about Russia and all this? How much of a significant leverage point does Poland have in all this?
There is leverage, and we actually did see it last year when President Duda discussed the same issues with Xi Jinping in Beijing. But I don't think leverage comes from trade and economic issues. I mean, if you look at the statistics and numbers, I mean, and take China-EU trade numbers, the railway connection is something, I don't even know how to say it exactly. I mean, it's so less significant in sense compared to what comes to the EU through sea. So economically for China, it doesn't really matter if the border is closed or not. But it has quite some significance in the sense, in political terms. It is it's something quite inconvenient for the Chinese that these railway connections, which were very often put out as an example of how good the Belt and Road Initiative is, how effective it is, and right now if it's stopped, it creates an uncomfortable situation in terms of image. And Xi Jinping was very much engaged in this initiative. It is his own, presented as his own initiative. So in that sense, it creates something that China needs to at least explain publicly why these trains are not going into the EU, right? I mean, so that matters, and that's why it's also quite a good instrument right now, looking from the Polish perspective, and also a bit of the EU's perspective, also, to remind Chinese that there are costs coming out of what's going on, what kind of policy Belarus does, and what kind of policy Russia does. In the case specifically, in the case of the hybrid actions on the border, and that's why Poland decided to close it right now because of the Zapad exercise mainly. But it's also, but these are important things to remind the Chinese about, that their cooperation with Russia and Belarus too, it has some, there are consequences.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those consequences. As you said, with Wang Yi here, an influential man in China as well. Him on the ground, speaking to people here in Poland, but also in the region. He'll be also speaking to others. But that's, I think, one of those hopes, isn't it, from the West, that they would sway China to that leverage into Russia to make the Kremlin stop this war in Ukraine. Are we in any way closer through that in this visit? Was a case made, do you think? Is that something that Wang Yi was partially more convinced at all?
No, I'm not convinced. I don't think so. I mean, looking at what actually Wang Yi said before, when he, for example, visited Brussels a couple of months ago and spoke with Kaja Kallas, and when he openly admitted to her that it is not in Chinese interest for Russia that Russia loses a war in Ukraine. I mean, so there are a lot of examples like that in the Chinese policy, in Chinese official statements in the recent months and years. So I actually believe that what Wang Yi's message is right now is that to the EU, and also probably he said it in Poland, that EU should not count on China changing its policy, but rather should think more about engaging with the Chinese in order to have better economic relationship, also in respect of what kind of problems EU has with its transatlantic partner. Mm-hmm. And that's, I believe, it's the main message from the Chinese right now. They're feeling quite confident in the sense, in the context of their relationship with the US, the negotiations ongoing. We just heard yesterday they reached a deal on TikTok, probably quite important issue for the Chinese and the Americans too, and they are in the process of negotiations, trade negotiations. I mean, tariffs are on hold by President Trump, so they're feeling quite confident, and they're trying to present their confidence also to their European partners, to the countries of the EU right now. And this is, I believe, unfortunately, this is the main message, and I would not expect China to actually be able or be willing to use its influence, which it has over Russia, in order to anyhow seriously convince Russia to seriously engage in some kind of negotiations or peace talks with Ukraine. Mm-hmm.
Coming back to trade for a moment, you said Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, it looks bad, this route being closed. China wants to be seen as reliable. It's made heavy investments over there. As you said, it's a dream project of Xi Jinping himself. I mean, the EU has decided to counter this in a way with this global beltway, or gateway rather.
Gateway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, does that have any, let's say, cloud in all this? I mean, this is obviously going to run counter to what the Chinese have done. And is this a bit too late? How do you compare these two projects?
It is too late, yes, but I think it's also a bit of a beauty of the European Union, in a sense that it's quite a complex organism, and some kind of decisions are being done with a lot of complexity, so to speak, and probably too late and probably too little sometimes. But I think the process and the understanding of how important is maybe not to counter the Belt and Road Initiative, but to create a new environment of cooperation with partners let's call them like-minded partners in other parts of the world in order to reduce the EU's dependence on China, which is huge, and which also makes these, this kind of not the de-risking ideas on how to reduce it very hard and difficult from the EU's perspective. And that's also in the context of what, for example, President Trump recently wrote in his letter, right, that he expects the EU to cooperate with the US in tariffs on China, to put 100% tariffs on China, which is unrealistic totally. I mean, because of these dependencies. So Global Gateway is a program probably too small and too late, but still going on, and at least creating some opportunities to strengthen the cooperation with partners globally. I mean, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, to at least be able for the EU, which has its capabilities and has also the amount of the money, the capital, needed to engage and invest. So it can help at least to strengthen these de-risking ideas.
We've talked about de-risking. We've heard that for a while now. It always seems that the EU and many European states are caught in the middle, right? There's now, as we just alluded to, more pressure from the United States. There's also a reluctance by China also to do something that Europe wants it to do. On which point does Europe have some kind of leverage, do you see? Does Poland have leverage here in any way in China? Where does that relationship go in the future? I mean, this is more of a divergence again. Do we come closer to China? Is there middle ground? How do you see this working out?
Well, I don't see any solution rather than keeping with a transatlantic cooperation, specifically from the Polish perspective. I mean, the US is our main security guarantee, right? I mean, an ally. And considering of what's going on, what kind of policy Russia does, right? I mean, intrusion of drones is just last example of what kind of security threats we are dealing with right now. So I don't think there is any other solution than trying to keep the US in Europe, with all the difficulties and complexities. I'm aware of that, but so China is not an option here in that regard. Obviously, and EU has some leverage on China, and that's clearly seen by Minister Wang's visits and Chinese officials traveling to also Western Europe and trying to convince the EU to actually strengthen the cooperation, to go back, to forget about China-Russia relationship, which has been for quite a while presented by the EU as the main blocking issue. So they try to convince the EU, and they try to reach deals on electromobility. They use these the instruments they have in terms of rare earth materials, for example, and blocking the exports, or at least making the export more difficult for European companies. We just experienced it a couple months ago. So there is leverage there.
All right, so it's leverage, but it's a complicated one, I think, in the next few weeks and months ahead. Look, appreciate all your insights. Thanks for coming in. That was our guest here, Marcin Przychodniak. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned. As ever, much more right here on TVP World. Goodbye.